everybody. Go ahead and have a seat. I always hate interrupting conversation. If we've never gotten the chance to meet before, my name is Justin. I'm one of the pastors here at New City, and you've already heard a couple times, this is not our regular location, but we are super glad that you are here. One of the things, if you've ever gotten coffee with me, if we've ever gotten to go get lunch or something like that, one of the questions that you might have been asked, one of the things that I might have asked you probably like right off the jump was, what's your story? And it's always fun for me to see your reaction or see whoever's reaction whenever we're getting coffee and we're having some casual conversation, small talk, which, I love because I love you, but I hate so much. But we will be having small talk, and then I'll be like, hey, man, just tell me your story. Or like, hey, what's your story? And I love that question because the typical questions are like, are you married? Do you have any kids? How many kids do you have? Where are you from? If you're in college, what year are you? What's your major? Those kinds of regular questions. And you get some information from people with those questions, but you don't hear what really defines who they are. And when I ask people their stories, there's a long range of responses that I get. And range, I mean like the amount of time it takes for them to tell that story. Sometimes it's about a 5-minute thing, and I know, okay, when I hang out with this person, I'm having to drive the conversation, which as an introvert is my worst nightmare. And I also know it would be their worst nightmare too, so we're screwed from the get-go. But sometimes there's about a 45 to 50-minute long story, and I'm like, yeah, That's right. Okay, I've got another coffee meeting in like 5 minutes, but keep going. You turned 3, and then what happened? And it's crazy. And I never want anybody to ever like feel insecure or anything like that when you're telling me my story. I'm generally actually very interested in it because you can tell a lot about a person because of their story. And if you've been around New City for a little bit, you've likely heard most of mine, if not all of mine, and we don't have time to tell it today. But the text that we are reading this morning in our Year of the Bible series is what is considered to be the nation of Israel's defining story. So if you were getting coffee with the nation of Israel somehow, and you were like, tell me your story, this is the story that defines who they are in the Bible. And so we're going to Exodus. You have a Bible. If you've got a physical Bible, hold it up. Hold it up. We encourage you to bring a physical Bible to New City, not because there's anything magic about that, but because we really do want you to be looking at the text while we are looking at the text, because what does not matter is my opinion. What will not help you in life ultimately is my opinion, but what the Word of God has to say. And if you don't have a Bible, don't worry about that. That's okay. We're going to put it on the screen. But if you need a Bible and money is an issue for you, we've got free Bibles right over there. You can just take one or ask me or somebody on staff at New City. We'd love for that to be our gift to you. And today we're going to be covering a lot of ground. The first basically half of Exodus. And so if you've got a physical Bible, if you've got a phone or a tablet or something like that, this is going to be very easy for you. But if you've got a physical Bible, put a finger in Exodus 3, in Exodus 12, and in Exodus 14. Just put a finger in Exodus 3, Exodus 12, and Exodus 14. Let me give you a summary here of this story. We're obviously not going to be able to read this story, but it's a story that is extremely familiar to probably just about everybody in the room, either because you grew up in church and you've heard this story before, or because it's such a famous story that you've just heard this. If you've ever seen Prince of Egypt, any 90s kids? Yeah. Or if you're very old, Charleston Heston going, there's some people in the room who've seen that. Okay, very cool. I've not even seen that. I thought I was the old guy. Okay, this is a story that a lot of people know, the Exodus narrative. And so what has happened is we've been spending the last several weeks talking about the introduction of the Bible, Genesis 1 through 11, of how God created this world good and you and me to be a part of it. But you and I messed everything up and everything is broken. This is not a debatable fact. Nobody disagrees with this idea. You know that your life isn't what it should be, and you know that your world that you live in isn't what it's supposed to be. We just all intuitively know this, and we would call that sin. It's the reality. It's the experience that we all have of the reality of sin, the brokenness of this world. And God is on a rescue plan from the very beginning. Genesis 3 is when the first sin happens. The end of Genesis 3 is the beginning of God's pursuit of the sinner. We've actually had 2 sermons. You can go back on YouTube and look at these. 2 sermons titled God's Rescue Plan, Part 1 and Part 2. And so the whole rest of the Bible is the story of God on the rescue. That God is on a mission to rescue his people and his good creation from the sin that you and I and the enemy introduced into the world. And one of the things that happens at the very end of the introduction to the Bible is that you have this story of the Tower of Babel, or as it's going to be called the rest of the Bible, Babylon. And it's kind of this climax of like the city that humans would build apart from God. And it's not a good thing. It's a terrible thing. We're doing exactly what we should not do. Everything about this city is the opposite of how we were supposed to live. And you get this picture that left to ourselves in this world, we would create hell on earth. And here's the thing, we don't have Kids City this morning, and there are small ears in the room, but I would be able to right now, and we're all for the adults, you don't need me to, you've got your own stories of this or stories that you heard. I could list out a bunch of different things to just prove to you that we are living in hell on earth. Like this is a good world created by God, and there's many things beautiful about it, but it is deeply, 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 deeply broken. But God takes one man out of that city, out of the area of Babylon, and his name is Abram. You might know him as Abraham, and he calls Abram, and he gives him this promise to say, I'm going to make you into a great family. I'm going to make you into a great nation, and you are going to bless all the other nations of the world. This is God's rescue plan, a family on mission. And last week we actually talked about how we, the church, now share in that mission, that we are the new family with God on mission, the family of God on mission with God for the renewal of all things. And you can go back and look at YouTube for that as well. Here, the family of Abraham has gotten a lot bigger. You may know, you may not know, Abraham has a son named Isaac. Isaac has a son named Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons who become the 12 tribes of Israel. And God actually tells Abraham in this kind of like weird dream scene vision where it's unclear if Abraham's even like awake during this, like conscious of what is happening. But God is telling him about all these things. And then God just basically like, by the way, your people are going to be sojourners in a foreign land here soon. And what happens is that there's this guy named Joseph. Joseph is a part of the line of Abraham, and Joseph has got some skills. He gets sold into slavery by his brothers and stuff like that. If you're like, dude, what in the world are we talking about? Go read through Genesis. We're on a Bible reading plan. I would love for you to join that. There's some cards over there and stuff. The Bible is awesome. It's incredible. I just don't have time to recap everything. But Joseph, Abraham's family, one of Abraham's great-great-great-grandsons, he ends up, through God's providence, to be number 2 in charge in the land of Egypt, which at the time is the most powerful nation on the planet. And so he's like the vice president of this very powerful empire, and it actually saves God's people from starvation and a famine, which is amazing. But then when you pick it up in Exodus 1, which we're not going to read, but in Exodus, what you find is that 400 years have passed, and the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, doesn't remember Joseph. And he doesn't remember any kind of deal or any kind of friendliness with God's people, the Hebrew people or the Israelites. You'll see both in our text. And so he doesn't remember this deal that they had. And what he does is he kind of notices that all of Israel, all of the Hebrew people, they're multiplying and they're filling the land of Egypt. Call back Genesis 1 if you've been paying attention. They're doing exactly what God has called them to do. Things are going really well, and it's a threat to the Pharaoh. It's a threat to the king of Egypt. And so he says, we're going to enforce slave labor on them to keep them down. And it actually says that the harder the Egyptians were on the Israelites, the more that they multiplied. You got to know, just as a side note, the places in the world where the church right now is most viciously persecuted, it's growing the fastest. Okay? It's just how God works. It's just how God works. And so it kept more slave, more work, more like punishments, more hard work, whatever the case may be, and more multiply. And then Pharaoh kind of sees this and he's like, man, like this is crazy. And so then what he does is he does like an awful, awful, awful thing. And Pharaoh actually becomes kind of the representation of like just evil on earth. Egypt becomes the new Babylon, so to speak. And Pharaoh demands the killing of all of the baby boys who are Hebrew, who are Israelites. And one instance, he demands that all of the baby boys are thrown into the Nile River. And one baby boy, in this weird kind of like civil disobedience, ironic kind of a way, he's thrown into the Nile River, but not just thrown, he's actually put into a basket. And he's floated down the Nile River. And I'm just bragging on like God's providence here and his ability to control this situation, which is going to really be fruitful for us and helpful for us at the end here. But this boy, he's not named, I shouldn't give it away yet. Okay, so he's going down the aisle. He's going down the Nile, and he's in this basket, and he gets caught up in these reeds, and Pharaoh's daughter finds him, has pity on him, wants to adopt him, even though she knows the law, even though she knows that he's a Hebrew, and gets her assistant to go and find a woman to nurse this baby so that she can raise him. And the woman that they find is actually Moses' mother. It's incredible, and I just named him. She names him Moses. It's Pharaoh's daughter who names him Moses because it means something about being drawn out of the water. If you know your story, the Bible is awesome. Okay, so this is what happens. This is where we are. 400 years of slave labor at the hands of the most powerful empire. And you might be tempted to think, where in the world is God? Where in the world is God? Like one of the things that is true about Exodus, one of the things that you learn when reading Genesis, Exodus, and just the whole Bible is that God is just not in a hurry. He does not work on your timeline. He is not interested in doing things the way that you would have him do it. And he's always got reasons that you will never understand, that I will never understand. And he's a big boy. He can take it when the Psalms are full of people shaking their fists at God going, why aren't you doing it this way? If you ever ask the question, like, why wouldn't God do this? Like, why, all kinds of questions. I don't have time to get in. I got to be really self-disciplined here. We're covering a lot of scripture. But like lots of questions about God saying like, well, if I was God, I wouldn't be doing that. You ever felt that? Well, here's the deal. Yeah, and it would be terrible if you were God. It would be horrible. Because this God, he's got 10,000 reasons for everything that he does. And maybe you might be able to see 0.000000001% of them. And so God is always working. But if you're an Israelite, if you're a Hebrew slave in this moment, you might be wondering, where is God? What about the promise made to Abraham? What about the promise reiterated to Isaac? What about the promise reiterated to Jacob? What about this whole thing with Joseph? Like, where is God now? And that's where we pick up the story. Moses is, by Exodus 3. He's a grown man. We've fast-forwarded several years, 80 years actually. He's married. He's been in a wilderness area outside of Egypt because even though he was in Pharaoh's court, in Pharaoh's family, he knows, he's very aware that he is a Hebrew person, and he sees an Egyptian being very hard on a Hebrew slave, and he actually kills that Egyptian, buries him in the sand, and then it's like immediately discovered that he killed this man. And so he flees out of fear of Pharaoh. And so we've got this murderous slave/prince runaway. He's out in the wilderness, and he's just kind of minding his own business. He's out there forever. I mean, for such a long time. He's had time to build a family and all that stuff, and he's just watching his flock, and then he sees this bush burning. It's a famous story. You've heard this before. He sees this bush burning, and then he notices that even though this bush is on fire, it's not being consumed, which there's a whole thing about that. Like, imagine like if you were Moses with your cell phone, would you have noticed that? You wouldn't have. So keep it in your pocket. You might see a miracle. Does it make sense? But that's a whole other thing, okay? This is like 80 sermons to preach in this one sermon. But here's the deal. Okay, so Moses is going, and he sees this burning bush, and he says, man, this bush is burning, but it's not being burnt up, so let me see what this is about. And the bush starts talking to him, and it's clearly God. And he says, take off the sandals from your feet, you're on holy ground. And he says, I'm going to use you to deliver my people Israel. This is what he says, one of the things that he says, Exodus 3, starting in verse 6. It says, and he, that is God, said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Why is he afraid to look at God? Remember, in the garden, they just walked with God. They just met with God face to face. They had no problem in the presence of God. Why is Moses afraid to look at God now? Because of the reality of sin. There's a clear kind of picture here of the division between God's space and human space, of God's holiness and our deep, deep brokenness. So he's afraid to look at God. And then verse 7, it says, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters or slave masters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them or to save them or to redeem them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. What he's talking about there is famously called the Promised Land. So you imagine like being one of these slaves in Egypt, a Hebrew slave crying out to God, saying, where are you, God? It's been 400 years. You've ever cried out to God? This right here is proof that he hears you. That God is listening to the cries of his people. Now, it was 400 years before he decided to react. God is not in a hurry. But you are never alone. You are never alone. God hears the cries of his people, and he decides that he's going to get Moses, and he's going to rescue, to deliver, to redeem his people. And so Moses, there's whole stories about this and everything. Moses has an argument with God, and God proves to him, like, no, don't worry. Like, I know you're insufficient for this task. I know you suck, all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, you killed that guy. Like, I understand. Yes, 100%. I'm in the business of using broken people. I got you. And they have this whole argument. Eventually, Moses is like, fine, I'll do it, right? And so he goes to Pharaoh. Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, anybody know the song? Pharaoh, Pharaoh, oh, baby, let my people go. Yeah, and they're like, yeah. Okay, so I'm the only one who grew up in cringy Sunday school. Okay, so he goes and he says, let my people go. The God of the Israelites, the God of the Hebrews is saying, Pharaoh, let my people go. And in God's patience, he actually gives Pharaoh many opportunities to do the right thing. But the Bible actually says that Pharaoh's heart was hard. that it was hardened. And Pharaoh just was not going to do what God wanted him to do. He was going to do whatever he wanted to do because Pharaoh himself thought of himself as God, much like the people in the Babylon narrative, in the Tower of Babel narrative. And so God actually sends these plagues, these 10 plagues, and the whole point of these plagues, some scholars even say that like each plague is actually a personal attack, like a specific attack on one of the gods of Egypt and stuff. But the ultimate message here that God is doing in Egypt is he's saying, Pharaoh, I am God and you are not. This is not an equal battle. We said this at one of the first sermons in this series about the battle that has come forth between God and the serpent, between the God of the universe and the enemy. That you know from the beginning that this is not an even fight. This is not like we're not sitting here wondering who's going to win. God is going to win. Jesus is going to win. And the 10 plagues are another example of that. And so he just shows Pharaoh, I am in charge. You are not. You are but a speck on my earth, and your very existence is because I allow it, Pharaoh, and I can take it anytime that I want to. And he kind of proves it. In the final plague, it's this terrible, terrible scene where God, again, because Pharaoh has refused over and over and over again to do the right thing, God actually orchestrates, he ordains the killing of all of the firstborns of the Egyptians. This includes human babies and it includes livestock. And it's a terrible, terrible scene. And the way that the Bible writes it, it's not like this, like, gotcha, Pharaoh. It's like this deep, deep, deep sadness of, wow, look at what sin can do. Look at what a refusal to accept God's invitation to turn around, to repent, what it can lead to. It's a horrible, horrible scene. And Pharaoh and the other Egyptians are fed up. They've had enough. And they let the Israelites go. Now, there's one detail in this that you may have heard. This night is actually commonly referred to as the Passover. And you might not know why. I don't know. But it's called the Passover for this reason. In Exodus 12, if you've got your finger there, Exodus 12, this is what God says to Moses about what's going to happen. So this is actually before the event, Exodus 12, starting in verse 12. God is telling Moses, giving him instructions because of what's about to happen. And this is what he says. God says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign." So he gives them this instruction to take a lamb, a baby goat or a baby sheep that is flawless, that is like perfect. It doesn't have broken bones, doesn't have any spots on it, anything like that. And he take this baby lamb, or this sheep or goat, and to slaughter it and to spread the blood over the doorposts of their house. This is the instructions that are given to every single Hebrew person in Egypt to say, like, this is what's going to happen. Like, God is saying, like, the angel of death, the destroyer is one thing that he's called. He's coming to Egypt, and we're going to go through Egypt, and all of the firstborn are going to die. But if you slaughter this lamb, if you put the blood over your doorpost, which to us sounds very, very weird, but you're going to get it here in a second. If you slaughter this lamb and you put it over your doorpost, then I will see the blood. And this is what he says. He says, "And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague will befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt." And so God says, I am coming to destroy evil. I am coming to get rid of this slavery that enslaves you, to get rid of this evil. I'm going to do a very harsh thing. This is what we would commonly call like the wrath of God or the judgment of God. If that makes you uncomfortable, just stick with me because you're going to see something here that I think is going to help. But he's saying, like, I'm coming in judgment, but if you slaughter that lamb, that perfect, flawless lamb, and you spread the blood of that lamb over your doorpost, I will see that blood, and that blood will be a signal to me that this house is one of my people, and I will pass over it, and the death that is coming will not come upon the people of this house. Are you with me? This is what he says. And so Passover happens, and the morning comes, and the Egyptians discover the horrific just darkness that has occurred. And the Hebrews understand that God is fighting for them, that God is out to free them. And so then Egypt, they've had enough, and they send the Hebrew slaves out. They free them. They say, okay, go, get out. We don't want any more to do with you. We don't want any more to do with your God. God has delivered his people, and they get up. In fact, even it says that like the before all of this happened, that God gave the Hebrew people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. That, I don't know exactly how that worked out in everyday life, but they actually got to take with them like silver and gold and like stuff to like help build their nation. And they didn't like go and steal it. Like God gave them favor with the Egyptians. I have no idea what that like means. Like you just went and knocked on doors, like where the Egyptians were like, hey man, you guys got any gold? And they were like, sure, here you go. I don't know why you need it. But this is just what happens. And so God is taking care of his people. He's freed his people, and they are headed toward the promised land. And that's the first half of Exodus. It's part of the first half of Exodus. That they are free. They are leaving. They gather up, and they've got all their stuff, and Moses leads them out of Egypt through the wilderness on their way to the promised land. So what's the point of all of this? Like, is this just a good story? Is this just like an awesome like narrative in the beginning of the Bible that just kind of helps us see how powerful God is, or whatever the case may be? Like, what is actually happening here? And what is actually happening here is that God is giving through his word and through his actions in history, he's giving us a picture of our own reality. Because here's the deal. Sin is slavery. Sin is slavery. Sin is not, you've heard this word before, sin. Sin is not the bad things that you do. It is a slave master that has your heart in bondage. Sin is not the bad things that you do. It is a slave master that has your heart in bondage. Another way to say this is that you are not a sinner because you do sin. You do sin because you are a sinner. You, on some level, cannot help it. Why? Because you are not in charge. You are a slave that has a harsh slave master that we call sin. You sin because you can't stop, because you are a slave in this fallen state of humanity. And there are zero exceptions in the room. There are zero exceptions in our world, myself included, that we on our own are a sin or a slave to sin. That's the harsh reality. But just like the Hebrew people, when they cried out to God, God hears our cries. And our only hope is for God to see our affliction and come and to deliver us. So we're slaves. Every single human being, though created as a part of God's good creation, created in the image of God, is broken and enslaved to that brokenness called sin. This is why, by the way, that there are things that you really wish weren't true of you that you can't seem to change on your own. This is why there are things that you keep doing that you really wish that you would stop doing, and you've tried really hard, and you might have even gone for a long time without doing it, like maybe even over a year, when you're like, dude, I've experienced, you might have, if you're a Christian in the room, if you speak Christianese and stuff like that, you've been around Christian culture, you might even say, like, I've been set free from this kind of a thing. And then what happens is like a year and a half, 2 years later, you're back in it. Why? because you're a slave. You're a slave to sin. But we cry out to God, and God hears our cries. And this is what he did. He has come to deliver you, not with a mere sheep or a goat, but with the blood of Jesus. Jesus' death on the cross as the flawless, sinless man. We don't spread his blood over our doorpost, but we put faith in Jesus' sacrifice for us. We say, I believe Jesus' sacrifice is sufficient to save me, and God delivers us from our sin. And you can go read this. We're going to get to this whenever we get to the gospel narratives and we get to the crucifixion narrative. But if you read the crucifixion narratives, even especially John, the Gospel of John, his crucifixion narrative, there's all kinds of details included in John's crucifixion narrative that call back to this Passover night, where it's just one big like billboard saying, Jesus is the Passover lamb. He's the one whose blood covers us. So, here's the deal with some realities of slavery and the realities of God delivering us from slavery. If this is all true, if you are a slave left to your own, if you are a slave to sin, but Jesus has come and lived the perfect life for you, died the death that you deserve, and his blood covers you for your sin to set you free, there are only two realities you can live into. It is either you are a slave or you are free. It's either or. Those are the only two realities that you can live in. This is the reality, this is the truth of deliverance. This is the truth of salvation, of redemption, whatever word that you want to use to describe how God brings people to himself. In this case, in the Exodus, the Hebrew people one day were slaves. The next day, they were free. One day, they were in bondage. The next day, they were headed to the promised land. And the same is true for us. Left to your own, you are a slave to sin, and that is what is true of you. You may think you're amazing, and I think you're awesome. But if you are not in Christ, the reality is that you are a slave to sin, and that is all you are. But because of what Jesus has done, you can be set free. And the reality is, Paul writes this in the New Testament. He says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And if you have been set free, you are free indeed. What does that mean? It means if you're free, you're free. You're free. There is either slave or there is free. There is no in between. You are either covered in the blood of Jesus or you are a slave to your sin. But there is another reality. If we keep reading this story, there's this saying that's often said by Bible teachers and stuff like that, is that you can take the people out of Egypt, but it's really hard to take the Egypt out of the people. I remember me and Rebecca were at a park one day, and we overheard this woman speaking. She was speaking kind of loud, and she had a thick accent. And the accent, it wasn't like a accent from another country or another culture. If you're a Texan, then it is from another country or from another culture. But she would go around, she's like, hi, y'all. How y'all doing? Kind of thing. And immediately, me and Rebecca look at each other, and we're like, she's from Arkansas. We're both from Arkansas. Me and Rebecca from Arkansas. And so he's like, we were in Texas at the time. It's like, you can take the lady out of Arkansas. You can't take the Arkansas out of the lady, right? And here's the deal. These people, they've been redeemed. They've been set free. If you are in Christ, you are saved. But isn't it a reality as well that your slave masters just won't go away? If you were to ask any of the Hebrew people on their way out of Egypt in the wilderness, on their way to the promised land, if you would have just bumped into them and you say, hey, let's get coffee. And they would have been like, what's that? But let's get coffee and let me ask you, like, what's your story? They would have said this. They would have said, I was enslaved and I've been set free by the blood of the Lamb. That's what they would have said. Like, what's your story? What does it mean to be a Hebrew person? At this point, it means I have been saved, or I'm sorry, I was enslaved, and I've been set free by the blood of the Lamb. And they were on their way to the promised land by way of the wilderness towards the Red Sea. And then Pharaoh changes his mind. He realizes that he's just lost his most precious economic reality. He's lost an entire slave labor force, and he pursues the Hebrew people with an army. An army. And so the Hebrew people find themselves in this predicament with the Red Sea, which they've got to pass on their route. They've got to pass through this Red Sea in order to get to the promised land. There's a Red Sea on one side, a giant sea on one side, and the most powerful army in the world on the other, coming to bring them back into slavery. And this is what they see. This is what they say. They said to Moses in Exodus 14, starting in verse 11, it says, they said to Moses, is it because, this is sarcastic, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what you said to you? This is not what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. Do you think they really said that? Do you really think they were like, dude, Moses, we told you before, nah, we're good. We don't want to be set free. We love it here. And over and over again, you're going to see this throughout the Old Testament, particularly in Exodus. They're going to be complaining to Moses, and they'll be like, at least we had it better in Egypt. We had it better in Egypt. They've got such a short memory. Such a short memory. It says, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Now, here's the deal. Let me just catch you up on what has happened since they've left Egypt. God has appeared to them in a pillar of smoke by day and a pillar of fire by night to lead them in the right direction. So I want you, now, this is not like a symbolic thing. This is a literal thing. I want you to imagine you've just been freed from slavery because of 10 plagues, crazy stuff. Like he turned the Nile River into blood or made it dark all over the land. Like you've seen some stuff if you're one of these Hebrew people and you're walking out of Egypt free, a free person, and the God of the universe is leading you out of Egypt with a pillar of smoke, like a giant tower of smoke by day, and then a giant tower of fire by night. Like, again, not a symbol. You've literally seen this every day and night. And then the Egyptian army shows up, and you're like, we're going to die. It would have been better for us to stay in Egypt. Like, what short memories. But here's the deal. Their slave masters are coming back for them. And haven't you ever said to yourself, I was better off in Egypt? This is the new story that they would have said about themselves. I was enslaved, I've been set free by the blood of the Lamb, but I was better off a slave. And this is what you say every single time if you're in Christ. Every single time you say, well, this one more time won't hurt. Well, nobody will know. I'm not really hurting anybody. I'll get it together next year. This time is the last time. I can feel this destroying me, but I kind of need it to keep going. All you're saying is, I know that I was enslaved to this very thing, and I have been set free by the blood of the Lamb, but I was better off in Egypt. I was better off in Egypt. Every single person in this room has said that. If you are a follower of Jesus in this room, I have said that. I was enslaved. I've been set free by the blood of the Lamb, but I was better off a slave. But check out what God does. Just the next verses in Exodus 14. They're crying out. They're being sarcastic at Moses. They're saying, what have you done to us? It was better for us to be in Egypt. And this is what Moses says. He says to the people, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. And the Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be still. Or another translation, your translation might say silent. The Lord will fight for you. All you have to do is stay still, stay quiet, and watch God work salvation for you. What does God do? He splits the Red Sea in half, and they walk through on dry ground. And then as their former slave masters pursue them, the sea just comes back in on them, and it drowns all of the Egyptians. And now the Hebrew people have come out of the water. They've crossed over, and their slave masters are totally gone. You have only to be still. You have only to be still. There's a lot of people in the room who are struggling with something because you're a slave. Or maybe you've been set free, but that taskmaster, that slave master is still knocking at your door coming, hey, you need me. You need me. You had it good when you were with me. You had it good. Yeah, I know that preacher man or the Bible says that I'm bad, but this is okay. This is okay. Well, I know that the Bible very clearly talks against this, but you've heard YouTube Christians to say this is not like that bad. It's okay. Or like other Christians, or you've found a church that will tell you that this is fine. Whatever that is, like blah, blah, blah kind of a thing. Like it's your slave master just knocking on the door. Just knocking on the door. Come back. You had it better. You had fresh meat. You had something to eat. You had shelter. Come on. Come back. And some of you are trying really hard by your own will to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and to get it together and depend on your own righteousness and your own ability to defeat those slave masters. But here's the thing. You can't part the Red Sea. You can't part the Red Sea. You are hopeless on your own. But if you were to ask an Israelite at that time what saved them, it wouldn't have been, we got a bunch of swords and shields and we just absolutely annihilated all those Egyptians right there. We did it. That wouldn't be their story. Their story would be, I was a slave and I was set free by the blood of the Lamb and now I'm headed to the promised land. It had nothing to do with what they have done. It'd be nothing to do with like we got our act together. We said, oh man, we really don't like being slaves. And we said, we're now free. And then we just kept going kind of a thing. Like it's not at all. Like some of you are in this room striving in secret, striving, not telling anybody, thinking, I'm going to get it together. I'm going to like have this bondage loosed. I'm going to get these chains are going to fall off me. I'm going to get out of this slavery before anybody finds out. I can fix this on my own kind of a thing. And I just need you to know you can't. It's not going to happen. Your willpower can go a certain distance. You can free yourself, so to speak, for a year, maybe 2. But I promise you, the things that you're addicted to right now, the things that you're enslaved to, the things that keep knocking on your door saying, come back to me, you had it good, they're going to be there the rest of your life. You need something a lot better than your own willpower. You need the blood of the Lamb. You need to put your faith in Jesus. And here's the deal. I've had lots of conversations recently with folks at New City. There's a lot of new Christians in the room. There's a lot of people who have started following Jesus in the last year or so, or people who are exploring that. And we love that. It's such a huge thing for us that you have a safe place to question and explore the claims of Christianity, the claims of the Bible. And you've found at New City, you've been here for a little bit, you've found people to do that alongside of, and you found leadership at New City who's willing to give you the space to do that and to help you along the way, that kind of a thing. But some of you are like the new Christians, exploring Christians, and it's one of the things that I hear all the time in meeting with people is something to the equivalent of, I'm not sure that I have become holy enough yet, or I'm not sure if I have the faith yet. Well, here's the deal, and Bible teachers do this illustration all the time. There's several different versions of this. One of my favorites is that when they were walking down the Red Sea, when God had split the Red Sea in half, and you just see like a wall of sea on one side and a wall of sea on the other, there were likely those people walking through the Red Sea going like, I believe in God. I love Jesus. Like, I am all in on this. Look what he has done. I believe in the goodness of God. I'm walking on dry land. This is amazing. Maybe they're even running. Maybe they're just like, woo! We all know those people. We wish we were them, but a lot of us aren't. There were definitely people walking through the Red Sea, looking at the walls of deadly chaos water on either side, thinking, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. This is crazy. I don't think there are sharks in the Red Sea, but you see one just floating there, and it's like an aquarium, and you're like, there's no glass. Like there's no anything. I was at the Dallas Aquarium one time, and there was a leak in the roof in the bathroom below the shark tank, and I was like, we're going to die. We're going to die. That's a true story. I assume they fixed it. You just think, or another way of putting it, I've heard another thing is like on the night of the Passover, when God gives them the instructions to put blood over the doorpost and all of that you had some people who were like, hey, like, yeah, 100%, I'm doing it. I'm in. I've got it. I believe God is going to redeem us. I believe God's going to do it. And the other people are like, you think God's going to do it? And he's like, yeah, 100% confident God's going to do it. We all wish we could be that person. But there were also some people who said, I'm going to do it because I'm not an idiot. I'm going to do it. But I don't know if God's going to come through. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I know enough. I don't know if I'm well-behaved enough. I don't know if I'm holy enough, if God's really going to see that blood and really consider me a legitimate candidate for life. Like, I don't know. I don't know. And you know what the deal is? Both groups of people got through. Both groups of people were freed from their slavery. Why? Because it's not dependent on your faith or your goodness. It is dependent on his faithfulness and his power to save. You have only to be still. You have only to be silent. What does that look like? Surrender. To say, God, I cannot do anything about my circumstances on my own. I cannot free myself from this slavery. I cannot save myself. And I give you complete control. I give it all to you, God, so that you can save me. So now here's the question. What's your story going to be? You got three options. I was enslaved. Period. I was enslaved. I've been set free by the blood of the land, but I was better off in Egypt. Or I was enslaved. I've been set free by the blood of the Lamb, and I'm headed to the promised land. Some of you in the room need to put your faith in Jesus for the first time. Some of you just need to lay down some leftover chains, to close the door on some leftover slave masters. Some of you just need to remind yourself of God's goodness and your story. Whatever the case may be, we're going to enter into a time of response. And so if you want to just close your eyes, bow your heads. We don't do this for any reason other than focus and to give you an opportunity to be with God in this moment. Like I said, some of you need to put your faith in Jesus for the first time. That you need to acknowledge the fact that you are a slave. I don't say that out of judgment. I say that as someone who was a slave, who still has slave masters knocking at my door. but who has been set free by the blood of the Lamb, and I'm headed to the promised land. If you want that to be true of you today, I want to invite you to respond in this way. To give up control and to say, Jesus, I put my faith in you. I trust you. I know I cannot save myself from my sin, but I know that you are the spotless Lamb, and your blood is sufficient to save me. I put my faith in you, Jesus. If that is you, what I want to invite you to do before you leave today is to scan that QR code in front of you and to say, I'm saying yes to Jesus. We want to know about it. We want to help you along the way. For some of you in the room, you need to lay down some old chains. You've been taken out of Egypt, but there's still a lot of Egypt in you. I want to invite you. You can come and talk to me or Ryan. I know space is limited here, but come find us, or even just after in your seat. Just have a moment with God where you lay those things down. You recognize that God is the God who fights for you, that you can't defeat those slave masters on your own, but God is a God who parts seas and frees captives. And for some of you, you just need to spend some time, spend a moment dwelling on God's goodness. To remind yourself that this is the defining story of who you are. If somebody were to ask you, what's your story? Your story would be, I was a slave, but I've been freed by the blood of the Lamb, and I'm headed to the promised land. Whatever the case may be, let's worship the good God who frees us.